Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Black Dynamite from 2009. Now, Black Dynamite is a movie I've been meaning to watch for a while. It came up in conversation just yesterday, 2 days ago. And I forgot about it and then remembered it, and then before I forgot it again, went and watched it. And I'm glad that I did, because it's been on my list for quite a long time. I remember talking about this near when it released, and it just kept falling off my radar. Black Dynamite it's fantastic. It's wonderful, and it's weird. And I think for a lot of people, this could be a very polarizing film, probably for maybe not the wrong reasons, but for lack of comprehension. Black Dynamite is essentially it's an homage of sorts to the blaxploitation genre. And I swear that I've talked about blaxploitation films and the blaxploitation genre before on this show, but I can't for the life of me remember which video it would have been on or why. It might have been on one of the Tarantino discussions, because Tarantino notoriously likes and is influenced by the blaxploitation genre. The blaxploitation genre, for anyone who's not familiar, in a very brief word, is basically a genre that came out of the 70s of relatively low budget, mostly black produced, black directed, more or less mostly or completely black cast movies in a response to basically an underserved audience. Even today, it's a huge problem that representation is not proportional or even reasonable to the people, the potential audiences out there. And especially in the 70s and thereafter, there's obviously a greater social awareness and some more social activity going on in predominantly black communities, where among a great many other things they were neglected was media representation. And so out of desperation to see black people in film, basically a whole new genre was born. Blaxploitation is a topic that I am not fully qualified to talk on, but even I, in my limited knowledge, feel like I could spend an hour or more talking about, because it's really fascinating where it comes from, what its like cinematic influences are, and also like socially where it comes from and the reasons for its existence. What's really interesting about it from like a cinematic perspective, cinematic analysis perspective, and this Black Dynamite as essentially both an homage to a bygone era and parody of that same era, is that it is explicitly acknowledging, poking fun of, and having some reverence for what amounts to basically outsider art, where blaxploitation films are typically contain a lot of, I don't want to just say like things you wouldn't see in mainstream media at the time, but because they were being made by people who were not in the industry or had limited training or were sort of like, flying by the seat of their pants in terms of making art, it's in a sense, it's a form of what's typically called outsider art. It's a term that it has some ups and downs, and there's some concerns attached to it, but outsider art in terms of being obviously very true art, but really interesting in the things that the new things that it brings to the table, by virtue of not being constrained by the strictures of a system as it's established. That particularly in this case being the Hollywood system that had gone on for, 60 years at that point, and its whole history there. And so blaxploitation as a genre comes with a lot of interesting stuff, because they were typically made on a lot of lower budgets and with limited, technical knowledge and those sorts of things. There's a lot of editing cheapness and like weird cuts and camera work that is just not seen anywhere else, or at the time was not seen anywhere else in cinema, because they were thinking of doing things that were not typical of the movie system at the time. At the same time, because they were often on pretty shoestring budgets, there's a lot of one take stuff where it's just like, we've got our one take and we're moving because we don't have the time or the money to do 20 takes of this to get it quote unquote right. We're doing our story, and we're like doing it as cheaply and fast as possible to like get it done and to get it out there. And so this has a like very unique set of elements to it that then have shown up both in people who have like appreciated and respected the things that came out of that genre. Tarantino is an obvious one, but there's a whole host of different directors and actors and things that have taken after it. And there's small pockets of what might be called like blaxploitation revival, or blaxploitation continuation through the 90s and 2000s. And it's visible even in things like more mainstream, quote unquote, things like Austin Powers has a lot of homages to blaxploitation features. And so back to Black Dynamite, this is very clearly like both in just viewing it as well as in its the background behind how it was created, is very clearly from people who know blaxploitation films really well and really appreciate both the good and the bad that comes with that. The weird stuff that you only see there, the strange editing, the like wonderfully cheesy, over the top things, the lack of structure. And I can't even use my like typical list or I can't really carefully use my typical list for critiquing a movie, because it is parodying something that is deliberately outside the framework of the typical film system. In the same way I wouldn't apply my typical analysis to like a French New Wave film, or like German Expressionist film. I wouldn't apply it to a blaxploitation film, and I can't apply it to a blaxploitation homage like this, because it is trying to do something different, and I appreciate it so much. It is wonderfully polished in its cheapness, this movie is, because it is produced very much in line with, in keeping with the things that were available at the time, things like 16 millimeter film rather than typical 35 millimeter or 70 mil film stock that was being used by big companies. It was weird linear cuts and like weird film processing that like really color graded things in particular ways that were unusual, and like I can go through my list, because like as far as it is a perfect representation of what's wonderful about blaxploitation films. But to that same point, like the setting and stylings are deeply grained in like a particular era of like blaxploitation films, and like a black cultural experience that is like unique to a certain era, but also like even for the time that these blaxploitation films were originally being made, were absurd on their own. They were cheesy, they were over the top, and the audiences recognized that. They weren't looking for gritty realism. They weren't looking for that sort of thing. It's in just the same way as like so many other films. It's an escapism. And I'm getting too much into like the history of blaxploitation, and I could talk about like the encouragement and discouragement that it got from both within and without the black community in general, and like certain groups like the NAACP and these other things. It's really fascinating. You should look into it if you're not familiar. I think even without knowing all of that context, you can watch this film and get some wonderful entertainment out of it, because it is genuinely just funny. It's got wonderful pacing in as much as it has pacing. Like for typical movie pacing, for like a solid, well-structured story with good pacing and good beats, like it absolutely does not conform. But in its own sense, it's got wonderful pacing. It is constantly like the constant up and down of like violence, humor, weirdly sexual stuff, like jokes for like a particular community, and then like and back and forth. It's got a patter all its own. That's really wonderful. Like I said, the story and plot are like so thin and so absurd, but you can't take them seriously because that's not what they're for. The tone is up and down, but it's like, it's still like really, it's just happy to be there, and it's happy to be doing something all its own. And like the music, this like funk soul, like sort of recreation thing. These are I think these are all original. It's an all original soundtrack, or mostly original soundtrack, but like capturing the era and the music that was used to score blaxploitation films at the time in the 70s, as well as like wonderful attention to detail in terms of everything from the costumes to both the quality and the lack of quality in the costumes, the quality and the lack of quality in the sets and props. There's a wonderful recurring bit where just a character keeps slamming a door and you see the whole wall move, because that's the whole the joke. It is tongue-in-cheek, and whether that was like a lot of blaxploitation films took themselves relatively seriously, possibly more seriously than they deserved, but like this clearly recognizes the inherent humor in both the seriousness and the seriousness and the genuine importance of having that cheapness still be valid as a cinematic element. That like the lack of a perfect set does not inherently cheapen a movie. Sometimes it's just fun to watch a wall move when somebody closes a door because it's a cheaply made set. It's fantastic up and down. And I just had so much fun with this film. It's fast-paced, it goes really quickly, it's relatively short, and credit to all of the actors that are in here. Some recognizable faces, not so much. Michael Jai White, who I've only seen in like one or two things before, is fantastic. And I'm looking at his filmography, and I swear I know him from somewhere else, but I can't place him. Like, he's fantastic in this, and unfortunately the vast majority of his filmography is like really cheap, crappy, like direct to TV and films, like things like the WWE network movies and stuff like that. And he's fantastic and deserves to be lauded more. I'm just really appreciative to him and his co-writer and everybody else who made this film happen, because it is such a unique taste of like a kind of a forgotten era. There is a film that came out. Oh, is it Dynamite Returns? Oh, I can't remember it now. Anyway, there's a whole like semi biographical film with Eddie Murphy that I have been meaning to watch for ages. That was released a few years ago. That is like one of the only other things I can remember in really recent memory that came out and was like clearly appreciating blaxploitation films for what they were. So anyway, this film on its own is wonderful. It is very entertaining. As long as you don't have like some puritanical view of nudity and violence, I think you'll get something out of this, no matter your cinematic background or your particular interests. It's so funny. It is so funny. I can't say enough good stuff about this. And it's almost beyond critique because it absolutely, everything that it does wrong, it's doing deliberately, and it absolutely knows it, and it's relishing it, and it's loving the fact that it recognizes its own flaws and is deliberately trying to do them in honor of this basically dead genre. Anyway, I'll just stop there. This is a great film, and you should absolutely check it out. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.